This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Support for this program comes from the Gail and Tom Benson Charitable Foundation, committed to funding educational causes.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
We count on Informed Sources to continue the discussion on important local issues.
It's where our top journalists discuss stories they've covered.
Stay informed with Informed Sources.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. We have seen the Saint season and the Cantrell administration come to a close over the last week. Both fell short of expectations, but at City Hall and in the Dome, there are some promising new starters causing excitement. We'll look at these stories tonight, as well as a dramatic decline in crime and the city courting another Super Bowl. Joining us are our Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Jeff Duncan, sports columnist, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and also Saints analyst for Fox 8. Robert Collins, Dillard University Professor and political analyst for Fox 8 and Verité News. And Mike Perlstein, freelance crime reporter. All right, you guys, let's get started. And on our new year, the beginning of Informed Sources New Year, we're going to go over to Robert first. And Cantrell administration is coming close to its last few days.
Yeah, so we're about to turn the page, and so we're sort of looking back this week on the highlights or the lowlights, however you want to put it, the Cantrell administration. So I think as we look at the 8-year term, and as we look at the major factors, I think the first factor was COVID. She sort of inherited a very difficult situation during COVID. And I think the thing in COVID, it depends on who you ask. A lot of regular citizens will say, well, she did what she had to do to protect us. She did, the restrictions were necessary to keep us safe. But if you talk to a lot of business leaders, a lot of people in the business community, they'll say, oh, the lockdown went on too long. It was too draconian. Some cities opened up before us and they were able to get tourism dollars and we weren't able to get the tourism dollars. And so we lost money. So I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's 50-50. It depends on who you ask, whether you ask a regular citizen or a business leader. Secondly, I think the second issue that I think is going to be when historians look back on this, people are going to remember the excessive travel. She traveled a lot for a mayor. Now, to be fair, every mayor has to travel for business. You have to promote the city, et cetera. But I think if you talk to the average citizen on the street, they will say not only was the travel excessive, and especially since some of the travel was to Europe, and she took large entourages and she flew first class. A lot of people say, well, what benefit did the city get for that? I mean, new trade deals, new tourism routes, et cetera. Citizens just didn't see how it affected their life, so people were unhappy about that.
A lot of time when mayors have traveled through the years, it's been because of being a sister city.
Yes.
And I've yet to see anything coming out of being a sister city from any mayor over the years.
No, I haven't seen that either. So sort of a symbolic sort of thing. So another thing about this mayor is that I would argue she structurally weakened the office of mayor. When you look at, she lost control of the Pontalba apartment. This city council overrode 6 of her vetoes during this term, which is, I think, some sort of record. The city council convinced the voters to approve 2 different measures weakening the mayor's structural power. One is giving the city attorney more independence, and the second one is really the major one, is the city council now gets to approve all of the mayors, department heads. And that's new. No mayor in the history of the city had to deal with those restrictions. So there's no question because of her difficulty working with the council and the antagonistic relationship, the city council clipped her wings, and didn't just clip her wings, but clipped the wings of future mayors as well. So I think we have to talk about that. Now there are some good things in the administration too, and I think we have to be fair about that. The fair share proposal, this mayor was able to get through the legislature, was able to get a larger share of the hotel motel tax money that the state of Louisiana collects, and they were collecting it all for themselves. There's a larger share that comes back to the city of New Orleans now for tourism promotion. That's a positive. And then, of course, another positive is reforms for the NOPD. She did hire Ann Kirkpatrick, the police superintendent, who's a very popular superintendent. The new mayor, Moreno, is keeping her on as superintendent. She did get the NOPD from out of the federal consent decree. That's important. And of course, crime is down during the last 2 to 3 years. So I think those things are important. Now, but of course, what's going to really characterize this mayor's term is, in the play Julius Caesar, Shakespeare said that the evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred in their bones. And I think that's probably more true in politics than in any other profession. Regardless of what you do good in your life as a politician, when you get indicted, that's always going to be a major part of your legacy, right? You saw that with Edwin Edwards, very popular governor. But when people talk about Edwin Edwards, they always bring up his legal problems, And so I think just this indictment is basically going to characterize her term, especially since she's the first mayor in the 308-year history of the city of New Orleans to be indicted while in office. People bring up Nagin, but remember, Nagin was out of office when he got indicted. So she's the first mayor to be indicted while she's a sitting mayor. So unfortunately, that's going to be part of her legacy. And I think regardless of the criminality, obviously, a jury's going to decide criminality, so we don't know what's going to happen there. But even regardless of that, I think it just shows an incredible lack of judgment in her final term to have an affair with her police department bodyguard, to use taxpayer resources by doing it to try and cover it up. I just think it just showed an incredible lack of judgment on her part, and so I think that's what people are going to remember.
And some people would say you're being kind, just saying lack of judgment, but it is interesting how, let's call it scandals, because they certainly were.
Sure.
They're intertwined. The travel, which I think the first thing that people started latching onto, is connected to Vappy, her former police bodyguard, as well as the Pontalba apartment that got taken away for all future mayors, including herself. Obviously, that was connected to Vappy as well, and it just seemed that, it all comes down to, and it's interesting that there's even some criticism of the federal indictment, it's over an affair. But so that affair led to so much scandal for this mayor.
Exactly.
An alleged affair also, because
Alleged affair. I know
they
still
certainly
denying it,
deny
but-
it. So, and then as the mayor is leaving office, we found out about tremendous budget issues now that the new administration is having to contend with as well. So, all right, so the new administration begins next week. We say goodbye to the Cantrell administration. All right, Rob.
Turn the page.
Turn the page. Thanks a lot. Okay, Errol, let's go on over to you, because in mentioning, the incoming mayor, Helena Moreno, certainly she's gotten a lot of attention in this part of the world, but also national attention as well.
Well, with the new year, you get changes in offices, and there's a couple of changes in the mayor's offices around the country. The most interesting is probably in New York City, where Zoran Mandami was elected mayor. He was the equivalent of being a first-term state legislator in New York, and he won an incredible campaign, and was elected. Doesn't bring much experience, doesn't bring much administrative experience or governmental experience, but man, he's an impressive candidate, and he has a socialist agenda which plays well in New York City, because New York is such an ethnically mixed city. There's a picture right there of Mandami and Helena Moreno. I got to tell you, these are two good-looking mayors, okay? And in an age of telegenic politics, I think that they're going to be people who can get a lot of national attention.
Moreno, of course, a former news anchor.
Yeah. I was even thinking, this might be a presidential ticket in the future, except for the fact that the Constitution doesn't allow people who are foreign-born to be the president or vice president. And so other than that, I mean, if they can get the Supreme Court to change it, but I think we're going to hear a lot about them, like at conventions and when people are talking about gubernatorial candidates. When Mondami was first elected, Trump called him a communist. They said, well, New York elected a communist. But since then, Trump invited him to the White House, and they seem to get along well at the same time. And so, I think they could be two of a kind. They have two. Mondami's thing is more of a popular sort of thing. There's, rent controls is always a big issue in New York City. Free transit, or less expensive transit. Moreno gets the everyday issues of crime and street repairs. But I think that they're both two mayors that just kind of excite their people for a while and see what happens. Yeah.
Well, certainly the Moreno administration has a lot to tackle just right off the bat in terms of these budget issues that, we just mentioned. There might be a honeymoon period, but she's going to be tackling a lot. I mean, already there are going to be furloughs of some of the workers. So.
Yeah, but I tell you, pretty much all mayors that go in office have a lot to tackle. I mean, it's just the nature of cities. Being a big city mayor may be the toughest job in all of politics.
But a tailwind for Helena Moreno, unlike Cantrell, outgoing Mayor Cantrell, is that the council seems to be fully aligned with the mayor, which was the exact opposite of the friction we saw in the last administration.
For the second term for Cantrell, certainly she had a better relationship with council for the first term.
I don't think it could have been more toxic or worse in that second term.
The second one, yeah. So, look, we want them all to work together and resolve the city's problems, and we wish them luck, that's for sure, because there are some big ones. All righty, E. Okay, talking about problems, it wasn't the season that we had hoped for. It was really basically the season that you told us we were going to have. But it did maybe end on a little bit more pleasant note, and we're talking about the Saints.
I definitely think so. I mean, we're talking here about love affairs and honeymoons. I think there's a love affair going on right now with Tyler Shuck, the rookie quarterback for the Saints. He changed the entire narrative of the season. The season looked like it was really headed south. Started 1-8. They were one of the worst teams in the league. They make a quarterback change, and the quarterback really exceeded all expectations. I think even the Saints themselves, who were very high on him when he came out of college, it's amazing what a quarterback can do for a franchise. I think along with his play, the defense really started to gel at midseason. They went to a completely new defensive scheme under Brandon Staley, and it took a little while for that to come together. And those two things, the defense and Tyler Shuck's play, changed everything on Airline Drive. They won 4 of their last 5 games, and by the end of the year, they were playing as well as anybody in the division. Unfortunately, they were too deep a hole to dig out. But this was expected to be a transition year, a rebuilding year. Derek Carr surprisingly retired on the team right before the draft a year ago, and it really put them behind the 8 ball. And they are now out of that hole. They have salary cap room to go into this offseason to add to the roster. And it's so much easier to do that when you have a quarterback to build around. The Saints have one.
But Jeff, aren't they still in transition with some aging veterans?
Yeah, I mean, 2 of their biggest leaders on the team are Cam Jordan and Demario Davis. They're in their mid-30s, which in NFL terms is senior citizens.
And Alvin Kamara.
But they're both coming off their two of their best seasons, kind of defying Father Time a little bit. Team captains, Alvin Kamara, you mentioned, the team captain. Taysom Hill could be staring at retirement. He certainly sounded like a player that was ready to retire after his last home game at the Dome. So there could be a real transition in this offseason among the leadership of the team, and I think that's why Tyler Shuck's emergence is so important, because he's developing into a leader.
Jeff, a big factor, of course, was having a new coach, the youngest coach in the NFL.
Right.
So what is your assessment? How did he do?
Well, I think clearly he was one of the people behind drafting Tyler Shuck, and they really seemed to synchronize in the second half of the season. He also hired Brandon Staley, the defensive coordinator. So early on, the returns were a little shaky. I think there were a lot of people wondering if he was ready for the job. And again, when you hit on a quarterback, everything looks easier. And I know he clearly had a lot to do with the quarterback's development. He was a former quarterback himself. And Mickey Loomis, the general manager, talked after the season just a couple of days ago and really gave high remarks for how Kellen Moore handled that early 1-8 start. It could have been easy. It could have gone south easy. And he was a steady hand at the at the steering that ship out of that. And I think there's reason to be encouraged. Now, there's still a long way to go. This roster still has a lot of work to do, but when you hit on the quarterback like they have, at least it appears, things get so much easier.
And so how are we positioned for the draft?
Well, they don't have a lot of draft picks. They've made some trades, but they do have the number 8 overall pick, which is the highest they've drafted in a long time. But without having to worry about a quarterback, it just makes so much easier. And I think they really will look to add a star. You and I were talking about this, a star offensive player.
Think they go running back with that?
I think whatever the best playmaker is there, whether it's a running back, a wide receiver, even a tight end, but I think running back makes a lot of sense because Alvin Kamara has been injured the last couple of years. He's probably in the August of his career, and they need to add some kind of explosiveness. They were last in the league in what they call explosive plays. Those are big plays, big kind of chunk plays. They were really relying on this young quarterback to drive them down the field in 10 and 12 play drives. It's very difficult to do in the NFL. He did very well in that regard, but they need to add some explosiveness, and I think that'll be their priority.
So do you think we have a firmer foundation on which to build than we did going into this season?
Oh, no question. A year ago, we had no really idea how Kellen Moore would fare as a head coach. We had no idea who the quarterback was even going to be. Now both those key positions, I mean, the NFL is a quarterback, head coach driven league. We saw that here in all those great years with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And the Saints kind of did what most teams do. When you lose a Hall of Fame coach, a Hall of Fame quarterback, it's very difficult to replace. And we saw that for about 4 or 5 years. They now, I think, have that in place. And that gives them a real head start on rebuilding this team. But they have to have another strong offseason. They have to make the right selections on personnel in the draft. But it's easier, as I've been saying, with the quarterback. You don't have to worry about that. That's the most important position.
And then our Hall of Fame coach might be winning his 2nd Super Bowl this year.
Yes, Sean Payton is the coach, of course, of the Denver Broncos, of the number 1 seed in the AFC. And he's trying to become the first head coach in NFL history to win a Super Bowl with 2 different teams. Now, he's got a long way to go. We've seen the Saints be the number 1 seed and lose their first game. It can happen in the playoffs, but I know a lot of people here will be rooting for Sean Payton.
All right, well, as far as the Saints go, we're hopeful for the future.
I think there's
good.
reason to be optimistic.
Okay, very good. All right, thanks a lot, Jeff. Mike, over to you. Also, reason to be optimistic, lower crime rates in the city of New Orleans.
And it's a real positive story. You mentioned dramatic crime decreases. That's not quite the case on the major headline crimes being, murder and non-fatal shootings, each down about 3%, 2025 over 2024. But the underlying numbers are actually much better. You had armed robberies down 28%, carjackings down 35%. So when you look at the big picture on violent crime, not only were there strong improvements, but it's now sustained of 3 years of declines, all of this under Chief Ann Kirkpatrick. And that gives a lot of reason for optimism, simply because when you think about, I'll just throw the question out to the table here, when was the last time we saw across all the violent crime categories a 3-4 year decline? When was the last time?
No,
Richard Pennington in the late 90s. And there's something to having a chief who comes from the outside, who's not part of cliques and kind of political divisions within the police department, is just able to pick the best people to run the major command posts, and that's exactly what Ann Kirkpatrick did. I can't even think, you got to go back to Pennington, I believe, to find more positive, feedback from frontline officers about their chief than Ann Kirkpatrick. So she's a major factor.
That's really a very major factor and really good to hear. But other factors that came into play, too.
So many.
So like what?
Now, people might want to discount the decreases because crime is down nationally, in some cases by double digits. So New Orleans does tend to, ride the trend of national crime trends. There's a lot of socioeconomic factors that play into that regarding the economy and drug trends, for example. Once upon a time, New Orleans had an explosion with crack cocaine, and then it was heroin, and all of those are edging down, thankfully. But the biggest, probably single factor is the embrace of technology by the NOPD. Now, mind you, this is a department that just in the past 4 years has gone from 1,200 officers to about 900. And you would think that would be a recipe to struggle both with response time, solving crimes, and actually those have gone in positive directions because technology is a force multiplier. And we've seen a pretty wholesale embrace of things like all the crime cameras throughout the city, license plate readers. I did quite a few stories back at Channel 4 with the use of people who are on electronic monitoring through ankle bracelets can be tracked. And here's what has actually helped go beyond just the NOPD, but the entire criminal justice system, which of course includes the DA's office for prosecutions. They've become very adept at using the technology, the license plate readers, the cameras, the camera footage, and put it together to make these ironclad cases that are getting convictions on some of your most serious crimes. And Ann Kirkpatrick, a huge fan of technology. Now, there are some gaps. I would say there's still money on the table where the NOPD needs to catch up. We don't have our own crime lab for DNA that gets shipped to Baton Rouge, where the state police has their own backlog. So there's also room for improvement, and I know that's a big push of this police department as well as the administration under Helena Moreno.
And so the conviction's very important too, because convictions and you get the offenders off the streets, and that has an impact.
It's an age-old fact. Criminal justice is tricky, and I always would talk to criminologists, and you could have a bunch of different opinions on why crime is up, why crime is down. There's no silver bullet or answer. If there was, every city would use that same thing. However, it is absolutely true that a relatively small percent of habitual offenders cause a disproportionate amount of your violent crime. If you identify those individuals and get them off the street, which has happened through some coordinated efforts, let's not forget we have Troop NOLA, still a presence, about 30 troopers. The feds are still heavily involved in task forces with the NOPD. They have been able to identify and remove some major criminal players, and there's been a noticeable, calm in certain drug gang activity and some other driving forces of violent crime. So that's all quite positive.
Okay, that is really positive news. We hope that trend continues.
Yes.
Through the year. All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Let's wrap up with you, Jeff, because there was a trip taken by Gail Benson and Jeff Landry up to New York to tout New Orleans and Louisiana for more sporting events.
Yeah, they were there for a couple of days up in New York City, meeting with Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, and Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, mainly just updating both those commissioners on state of the franchises here, the New Orleans Pelicans and the New Orleans Saints, and also updating them on the most recent lease agreement that was, completed between the state of Louisiana and the Saints, and also updating them on about to be starting negotiations between the Pelicans and the state of Louisiana. That's why Governor Landry was there. That's why he had two of his top lieutenants with him. And in the end, I think this is going to end up being a very positive meeting for the city of New Orleans. Not only were we granted permission to our invitation to bid on the 2031 Super Bowl, which the city of New Orleans had missed that deadline because the negotiations on the lease agreement were not done at the Superdome. The NFL has now invited us back in to bid on that game. Usually that is a rubber stamp for the most part. It's your game to lose at this point. So I think New Orleans is looking at another Super Bowl. And if we can get this lease agreement at the Smoothie King Center done, that's a very involved project. It's a sports entertainment complex they're trying to sell as an economic development project to get maybe momentum from the rest of the state on board with this, as opposed to just a basketball arena renovation. If that gets done, I think we'll see an NBA All-Star game brought to the Smoothie King Center once it's renovated as sort of a carrot at the end of the stick.
So there's certainly interest in that as far as, the renovations to the arena. Is there a real plan for that? Do we know what it would cost?
We're trying to get those,
how that would be paid?
We're trying to get those plans. They have a master plan that's been laid out, and it involves the entire complex there. If you've been to Champion Square, you remember the old New Orleans Center Mall, the Macy's Garage, all of that would be involved trying to renovate. I think there'd be mixed use there, there'd be some retail, some real estate involved as well, residential, probably housing as well. All this is part of the plan, but again, that would require legislative approval. But the fact that Governor Landry and his key administration people were on this trip, were on that trip, I think, says that he's interested in getting this done. Now, can he get it done? It's one thing to get a Superdome renovation done. We know this is a football state. It's another thing, I think, to sell a basketball arena.
Now, Jeff, with the Pelicans as a team doing so poorly on the court, is that a hindrance to this large plan?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think that's why they've expanded the project to some degree. I think if the Pelicans were contending for an NBA championship or a regular playoff team, you might be able to sell the state on the renovation of the Smoothie King Center. And look, it's one of the oldest arenas in the NBA. It's the third oldest. Really hasn't had a lot of work done to it. So they need to work on that building, and Adam Silver said as much in that meeting.
Yeah, it's 25 years now, right?
Right.
25, 26
and look, it
years ago now?
does more than just, it hosts more than just basketball games. There's a lot of concerts there, a lot of other events, and that's the other sell for Jeff Landry.
Okay, we'll see. All right, right now we're going around the table.
Yeah, the downtown development district is behind a Canal street or sidewalk restoration project. It started at the end of December. It's targeted to go until the end of March. Redoing the sidewalks, make them friendly, easier to walk on, more visitor friendly, and they hope to have it finished again by the end of March and make it. And it's the 300 to 1600 blocks of Canal Street.
All right, very good, Jeff.
Well, we all know that New Orleans is a great nightlife and bar city, and one of my favorite nightlife and bar scenes is the Kingpin, and they celebrate their 25th anniversary this weekend. They're going to have all kinds of music on Saturday. So if you're out and about uptown, if the weather's nice outside, they have a lot of outdoor concerts celebrating the owners, Steve Watson and Ben Sherman, who've been there for 25 years.
And the name of the place again?
The Kingpin.
And it's off Britannia, right?
It's right off Lyons and Upper Line.
Okay, all right, very good. Sounds like a good time. Rob, over to you.
So we've known for a few weeks now that Governor Jeff Landry is President Trump's special envoy to Greenland. We now have a date for Governor Landry's first trip to Greenland. He's going in March to attend the largest dog sled race in the world, and he's going to interact with the people of Greenland. So hopefully he brings some Louisiana media on that State Department plane with him. I think I'm going to volunteer to go along on the Greenland trip to see the dog sled races.
A little bit different environment than what Jeff Landry is used to, I'm
But
sure.
that's when the sidewalk restoration's finished. Don't you want to see that?
Mike, over to you. Let's wrap this up.
Sticking with the New Orleans Police Department and crime improvements, one of the latest technological wrinkles that people are about to see is going to be the use of drones by the NOPD. A pilot program is going to be launched primarily in the French Quarter, but do not be surprised if you see a drone hovering toward, a disturbance or some call in the French Quarter, and to be expanded to the rest of the city eventually.
All righty, very good. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
We count on Informed Sources to continue the discussion on important local issues.
It's where our top journalists discuss stories they've covered. Stay informed with Informed Sources.
Support for this program comes from the Gail and Tom Benson Charitable Foundation, committed to funding educational causes.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.